I read for 24 hours. I am Beth, your friendly neighborhood graphic designer and reader. Last week, when I was doing my TBR jar to figure out what to read next, I drew a challenge prompt, and that was to read for 24 hours. A quick note on how I did this: I actually tracked how many hours per day I read over the course of about a week. I didn't read for 24 consecutive hours because, like a lot of you, I have a full-time job, and I also don't want reading, which is something that I do as a form of leisure and enjoyment, to become something that I don't look forward to. I did have some parameters for my challenge that I set and held to. I needed to get this done within a week simply because I wanted to post this video. I wanted to share with all of you what my experience was. So over the course of this week, I ended up reading 4 books. When I started this challenge, I already had a sort of TBR in mind, but things ended up shifting a little bit over the course of time, which you'll see in this vlog. Sometimes books can be misses, and I try not to push through if it seems like something should be a DNF, but I still ended up reading 4 books. I will join you at the end of the vlog to talk about those books and my overall thoughts about reading for 24 hours. So I'm about to go run some errands. I'm going to a little local bakery to pick up some fresh bread, and I'm going to start listening to The Book Jumper on my drive. Reading update. I have read for probably maybe 2.5 hours so far. I started Champion of Fate, and then I'm also listening to the audiobook for The Book Jumper. Main character, I don't remember what her name is, so it's probably not a good sign. She has been brought to Scotland to visit her grandmother. Her mother was pregnant with her when she was about 17, so she's a young single mom, and our main character is now 17. And they've had some hardships lately, so they decided they wanted to get away from it all, and so they went to visit their grandmother who lives in Scotland. When they arrive, she mentions that there's an amazing library in her home and that this girl is welcome to use it as long as she promises to read. And that's kind of weird, and then you find out that people in her family have this ability to book jump into a story, and their reason for being there is to ensure that the story goes on without any problems. So no characters are pursuing their own interests instead of following the storyline. No villains are getting away with things that they shouldn't, that sort of thing. I listened to the audiobook for that for probably an hour today, so 2.5 hours of reading so far. Not great, but I have had some tiredness and a migraine today because of the weather changing, but for now I'm feeling a little bit like tired and not like I want to read. But I think that the pacing of this, that's probably the best part, to not have to squeeze this into 3 days. Just reading on my own pace and taking my time has been going well so far. And I'll probably read some more tonight. Jeff and I have been watching Schitt's Creek, the TV show. It's his first time watching it. And in this audiobook, the mom's name is Alexis, and her daughter calls her by her first name for some reason because they're so close in age. The narrator's voice sounds a lot like the mom in the show Schitt's Creek. So when she says Alexis, I can't help but think and make that connection. So anyways, it's just been really funny, like how my reading lately has been reflecting on the show that we've been watching. I also recently finished Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. In that one, we also have a main character named Alexis, and I'm fairly certain that she coded the main characters, the love interests, based on that show. I'm enjoying this audiobook so far. It's pretty good. Gonna get back to it. Hello! I'm currently technically reading 3 different books. I am reading Champion of Fate. This one, we are following a young girl named Reed, who, when she is young, her village is attacked, her family is killed, and she is carried off by these impressive female warriors. But they're not heroes. They train to protect and train the future heroes, so they are hero makers. She is recognized because she was kind of the sole survivor in her village, and she has like a spark of bravery in her that they see, and so they bring her into their kind of mysterious, not society, but almost like a religion. So she's recognized as someone who will become a hero maker, an Aristine. So I'm pretty certain this probably has something to do with maybe Greek mythology, but I don't know. This could be entirely made up and just inspired by Greek mythology, but that's my guess. Let me know in the comments if you know that, but I will probably find out at the end of the book in the author's note or further research. It gave me vibes of The Book That Wouldn't Burn at the beginning, just with like the setup of how the story unfolded. It's a character who is kind of like taken apart from the world and the life that she knew, and she's introduced into this whole new system where she is training to become something very similar. She's not someone who has been recognized at an earlier age and introduced into this training program, so she is a little bit behind in some respects, and she doesn't have the same recognition as some of the girls who grew up in that community, I guess. So it feels like she has to be even tougher and even more prepared. So Gretchen and Leonine are her friends, and they are also competing for recognition. So that's how this is going so far. I'm not too far into it. I'm on page 71. In the world of men, we take no glory for ourselves. Our names are not known. Our deeds are not preserved in song. But Atropa is our city, and in the citadel we revere those who have come before. The other quote that I marked is something that Leonine said to Reed. You are so afraid to fail, but if you don't fail here, then your first failure will be real, and you will be dead. I liked that not just in context of the story where like the stakes are so real, but also just in real life, like we often are afraid to try and fail, and maybe the first few times that we refuse to try, the stakes are lower. It could prepare us for when it's like a serious thing. I don't know, I just feel like that's very true to life. I'm hoping for more kind of nuggets like that in this book. It's very young adult, but it doesn't feel like the young adult fantasy that I grew up with necessarily. Like, she also likes this boy and this boy likes her back. This has got like, maybe there could be romance in the future of this book because she has already seen who her hero will be and she likes how he looks, but that's all we have so far, so I'm fine with that. Part of the reason that I'm cool with that is because I already have a romance going here. So I'm reading Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I was having a kind of low week and I had read Part of Your World. It was just so funny and light, and it was like a Hallmark movie, but I feel like the interactions that people had were more true to life. In this story, we are following Bree, who is the best friend of Alexis, who's the main character in Part of Your World, and Bree works in the same hospital that Alexis worked at in book 1. I'm such a completionist and I like to do things by the rules, so I read book 1 first. It definitely had some spicy scenes that if you are like, I don't want open door scenes, then you're gonna want to skim through those. Overall, I felt like the relationships described were pretty healthy, and like, you know, the ones that weren't, that was a whole point, that like they weren't functioning in a healthy way. And I don't know, it covered some heavy topics in the first book. We had like abusive relationships, and this one is like our main character has had a divorce, and her, you know, her former husband, her ex, had been cheating on her, so there was an affair and everything. So she's kind of recovering from that. She's kind of made her whole world her work and her younger brother, who has kidney failure and he's waiting on a transplant list. One day at work, she meets the newest doctor who has transferred from another bigger hospital where he had a much better position, and it immediately kind of sets him up as a rival for her promotion to the chief of emergency medicine, which is what she wants. So initially there's like a rivals to lovers dynamic, but that fades quite quickly. Fun aspect of this book is that they send each other notes, and I'm not sure if that's going to continue throughout, or since they have eventually made the switch to talking on the phone and like messaging each other through Instagram, I'm not sure if that's going to be a factor anymore, but I would assume based on the title. So yeah, this has been fun. It's just kind of like a candy book. I needed something that like distracted me and it was light and funny. These books have served their purpose. The Book Jumpers. We are following a character named Amy Lennox, and every time I hear her name, I think of Mary Lennox from The Secret Garden. Her family and some others have this ability to book jump. Place a book over their head and they can vanish into the story. At the very beginning of the book, we discover Sherlock Holmes is missing, and that is kind of like been circled back to at the point where I am now in the story. That has set off a chain of things that weren't supposed to happen in many different stories. These are all primarily children's classics so far. So we have Alice in Wonderland, The Jungle Book, Oliver Twist, which you could argue is an adult book, but whatever. There's also like a French book that I'm not familiar with, and there's a character in that story who it has become kind of like a companion or a guide to our main character, but I don't know the story that he comes from, so I'm not placing him. Each chapter, I feel like we get introduced to another book, or there are other books referenced pretty early on. When they arrive at the grandmother's house, Alexis quotes from the first line of Anna Karenina because she, you know, doesn't want to be back home. I guess she has some unhappy memories there. So I'm not loving it, but I feel like I'm not really the audience for this book. Thing that is a little surprising to me is the element of Amy having been bullied back at school, and so this summer she feels like she's finally gotten away from all of that. She's 17, and I think she wants to start college early or get out of high school so she escapes that situation. The bullying that she's experienced was in the form of like body shaming. It was kind of like a heavy thing to have as an element for this very whimsical story, but I feel like this should probably get better as we go along. But yeah, I will keep you posted. Today I'm going to meet a friend at a local coffee shop. I have some work to finish up because I work on Saturdays, and then I will have more time to read. I've been enjoying my coffee this morning and watching Aya's Cottage, which is just like coziest little corner of booktube. Highly recommend. I love that she plays like crackling fireplaces when she is talking in her office, so it just feels like so calming to watch her videos. So I'm on chapter 26, and all I'm gonna say is hopefully Alexis is as good a friend to Bree as Bree has been to Alexis in Part of Your World, because we have a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, which is inevitable in this type of book, but there you go. Finished book 1 of this readathon. Jacob, the love interest, has anxiety, and so that feeds into a lot of who he is as a character, and it's something that Brianna has to really come to terms with and learn how to look out for him and his anxiety. And at some points it feels like too much, like she's doing too much, but I know like mental health and mental illness is like overrun your life, and it changes how you process things and how you can show up to social situations and all of that. So I just feel like the fictional portrayal of this was a little strange to me, because at some points it felt like she wanted to care for him as if he were a child, and I feel like that's a dysfunctional attitude to have in a relationship, especially a romantic relationship. So that's a little weird to me, but this was cute. The twist at the end, did not see coming, and I don't know how I feel about it, but I guess, you know, all's well that ends well. 8 hours in now to this read along, and I have mostly just read this book and the audiobook. I have not really read much of Champion of Fate because it's really not capturing my interest. I'm not even at 100 pages yet. I keep reading just a few pages at a time, and it's not getting me, it's not grabbing me. So I might either, my page flag's falling on the floor, I might either put this down and just start Stardust and see how I fare with that one. I want to be reading things that I enjoy, and I think that I'm not really enjoying this so far. Also, I have to say the Book Jumper's main conflict has been introduced in the story, and it's a bit of a mystery to solve, and then it just feels like every chapter, like something else is introduced, but it's not like a super high stakes. I feel a little bit bored about that one too. Gonna start Stardust, and I will probably grab another library book, but this is really like the first full day of this. I will have like probably like half days of reading or just evenings of reading the rest of this week. I feel like I've had a lot of time to read today, and I've mostly been reading or watching booktube because it is Sunday and all of the new videos come out on Sunday for the most part, including mine. So anyways, yeah, if you read this one, what did you think? Did you like it better or not as much as part of your world? Is there another Abby Jimenez book that I should read? It was just a fun time. So I would be, maybe I do like romance. I like the way the characters are interacting with each other in a healthy way. I will update you later when I have read more. Happy Monday. I'm at 10 hours. It turned out that that substance that was rolling down the roof yesterday was snow, and we got quite a lot of it. I progressed to like the 100-page mark for Champion of Fate. Feels like it just takes a long time for the characters to figure out where they're going and for you to get invested in like what they have to do. I know now where they're headed next, but I don't really care. So I could keep reading another 100 pages, and at that point I feel like I would be like a third or a half of the way through the book. I don't know if I'm willing to do that. I'm already eyeing some other books on my TBR shelf for what I could read instead of Champion of Fate. So I'm gonna go ahead and eat my breakfast and then get into some reading today. Happy day 3. Let's get some more reading done. So listen, I know it's probably most people's least favorite Neil Gaiman book. My favorite has to be The Graveyard Book. I have not read Coraline yet. I have read Neverwhere, which I thought was just okay. So Stardust, we're following a character named Tristran. Tristran. He has a very unpronounceable name. It's not Tristan, but it's Tristran. There's like an extra R in there. So Tristran really loves this local girl, and he vows that in exchange for a kiss, he will go retrieve a fallen star that they have witnessed fall from the sky. He's always had this strange ability to be able to tell where something is, like what direction he's headed and what he'll find when he gets there. And it's because he's probably not fully human, like he has maybe some like fairy blood or something. What I'm really liking about this so far is, and I'm almost done with it actually, but I really like how atmospheric the writing is. It's very descriptive, but it's also just so funny. Few of us now have seen the stars as folk saw them then. Our cities and towns cast too much light into the night. But from the village of Wall, the stars were laid out like worlds or like ideas, uncountable as the trees in a forest or the leaves on a tree. Tristran would stare into the darkness of the sky until he thought of nothing at all, and then he would go back to his bed and sleep like a dead man. There's like so many characters that we don't really know where they came from, or like we don't really know where they're headed. Collection of brothers who are all in line to be the king or the ruler of Sturmhond, I think it is, Sturmhond. They see the star fall, and the king says that the son who captures it, or like the jewel that he threw up in the sky that hit the star, will become the next ruler in his stead. He dies, and then all of these brothers set off to like capture that gem. So like there are paths that are going to cross, and then we have, of course, there's a big bad in the form of this witches who derive youth from the stardust. They also are like going out to try to find the fallen star, and they want to cut out its heart and live youthfully on it. I would agree that the movie is probably better than the book, but I still am kind of surprised by how fun a time I'm having with the book. There have been at least 3 or 4 moments in this book where the description of women, or I don't know, just applying a sexual connotation to something, and it was like, I mean, some of it too is like supposed to be darkly funny, but I don't know. I don't appreciate those elements because it's something that like obviously narrows the audience of who can read this story. And so I don't like that, but they have been fairly brief. The thing that's bothering me presently is that not our main character, but one of our main characters, so the star, spoiler alert, it's a person. She's very like naive about people and like their trustworthiness, and so her only hope at that point is that Tristran can intervene and like save her. There's a little bit of like resistance coming up in me about that. I will probably not get any more reading done until the evening tonight. I think I'm DNFing Champion of Fate, and I will probably return it so someone else can enjoy it. Sorry, Allie, I know you picked that one, but it's not as interesting as I thought it would be. That's my only update for now. Got my makeup done, which I don't do if I'm not leaving the house most days. I'm fine with the process of putting it on. It's just the removing it that really drags on me, and so I don't like to wear makeup every day. Let's go head into work. So altogether, I read 4 books during this week, and I DNF'd 2. I ended up DNFing Champion of Fate, and I also DNF'd The Book Jumper. I'm pretty confident about that decision for both of those books because Champion of Fate had some pretty mixed reviews on Goodreads, and a lot of other readers like me had mentioned that at about like the 30% mark, the 35% mark, they just really weren't connecting to the characters at all, and some had even progressed further into the storyline, and when our hero maker met her hero, they didn't really like him as a character. So I just felt like, okay, I was justified in making that call early, and I decided to pivot, and as you saw, I read Stardust, which was a pretty good time. I also ended up reading Finley Donovan is Killing It by Ellie Casamano, which was a new release that I was really looking forward to reading. And I subbed in another book that was something that I was excited to read, which was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. This is book 2 in the Emily Wilde series, and I loved it. So let's talk about the books that I read in order of how they appeared in this video. First, I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and this is book 2 in the duology, if you will, that begins with Part of Your World. I enjoyed my time with these. They are a romance, like kind of a comedic romance story, and I think the things that I liked the most about them is just how the interactions between characters are a little bit more true to life than what you can expect from a typical romance book. There is still witty banter and flirting and such, but it's not to the extent where it feels inhuman, if you will. But we do have some really nice male characters that are written from the perspective of a female author, and I don't know, this one was just fun. There was a letter writing or a note leaving component to this story, which is always fun. I appreciate me a good epistolary novel. In this story, we're following main character Brianna, who works in emergency medicine, and she is really gunning for the promotion that her best friend turned down. And it seems like she doesn't have any barriers to that happening until a new doctor arrives. He's a transfer from a different hospital where he held a much higher position. And this new doctor, Jacob, is kind of an immediate rival for her, but she keeps hearing from his friends and from mutual friends that this is actually a really good guy. And so she decides to give him a second chance. They form a friendship over notes that are left for each other during their shifts, and eventually they are both hoping for something more because they enjoy writing to each other so often, they enjoy catching up, they are starting to have feelings for each other. So this is kind of a sweet start to the romance. And then the other component is that Brianna's little brother is on dialysis and he needs a kidney transplant. And I think you can kind of guess where this is going from here. I don't even have to hint at it. Anyways, this was a sweet story and I would give it 3.25 stars. Next up, I have Stardust by Neil Gaiman, and this is a book that I would agree is not his best, but at the same time, you do get a pretty good taste of his writing style, of his world building, and it's also just kind of quirky. So there's a lot going on that doesn't necessarily get wrapped up in this story. There are a lot of references to tertiary characters and unexplored lands, I guess, and they don't really factor into the story so much. It just kind of shows how vast it is. But we have a kind of split between the world of people and the world of the Fae in this story, and it is made up of this town called Wall. And they have a giant wall that separates those two realms. And at the beginning of this story, there's a dalliance between someone from one side of the wall and the other, and a baby is born and no one really knows his true origins. And he grows up to be the boy Tristan, who is our main character, our hero of this story, if you will. Well, Tristan falls in love with a local girl, and in order to impress her, he commits to going to find a fallen star. and he doesn't really know what he's bargained for in making that commitment, but he decides to set off on his quest. And he has people that are aiding him in his journey, and then other people who are after the star for nefarious purposes, and we get to see a little bit of both. So the story is told through Tristan's perspective, through those other characters' perspective, but it all has third-person narrative voice. And overall, I like this story. It isn't the greatest when it comes to female characters because we have a character who hasn't really interacted with people much, and so she comes off as very naive, and then there are other characters who are kind of evil or manipulative. I feel like that could be another turnoff for this particular book. And there were a couple scenes where I felt a little uncomfortable, but overall there's mostly comedic language and it is a very short story, so it kind of couldn't do a whole lot more with the time it had, I guess. Then I called an audible and decided to pick up Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, and this was delightful. I'm so glad that book 2 lived up to the excitement that I had from book 1. Emily and Wendell are back teaching at university and making plans for a trip to complete some of Emily's vital research, and they end up having a couple tag-alongs to their trip in the form of Emily's niece, who is aspiring to be a dryadologist just like her aunt, and a fellow professor who has kind of butted heads with Emily over the time that she's taught at the school, wanting to go on a trip to learn more about the Fae, but the real purpose of their travels is to discover the Nexus, the door into the kingdom that Wendell comes from, where his stepmother has not only banished him, but also has been sending assassins to pursue him in the real world. The stakes are kind of high for them to actually find this. This location was also the site of a disappearance of a couple other academics who have never been seen again. So there's a bit of a mystery at the center of this, not just in terms of finding the door so that Wendell can reclaim the throne, but also finding those two missing people. So this was a lot of fun. I loved it. Just as good as book 1, if not more, just a little bit of a different setting. Some of the same characters we see again. Very good. And the last book that I read this week was Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice, which I believe is book 4 in this series. There's definitely a formula at play for this series, and so the beginning of the book kind of follows that same pattern of Finlay doing something, bumbling into crime and trying to cover her tracks. It's kind of lucked out in a lot of different situations, and in this one we have the complex dynamic of her ex-husband and her kids and her mom all joining a trip to Vegas where Vero is hoping to find her kidnapped boyfriend and break free of the debt that she owes to a mobster. So there's a lot going on. Oh, they're not going to Vegas, they're going to Atlantic City. That's something that I keep reading. They go to Atlantic City and shenanigans ensue, as they normally do. It felt a lot more like kind of a campy mystery movie. That wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but there were a lot of tropes in there that I recognized and didn't love. It felt a lot more absurd, I would say, than the other books, and there wasn't quite as much heart to this one, but it was still very fun to watch or read. It very much felt like it had the same beats as a comedic mystery movie, and I feel like that could be a hit or miss for some readers. When I was at like the first third of the book, I was already thinking this is probably going to be the last one for me because I just don't feel like I'm bought in anymore. By the time I got to the end, I was like, yeah, this was still fun. This was entertaining, so I enjoyed it. So those are the 4 books that I read this week. As far as takeaways, 24 hours actually isn't that long, but if I had had to do it in like 2 or 3 days, I don't think that would have been possible. Not just because of my schedule, but just because my attention is shorter than it has been. The last couple days, it was easier for me to realize I just needed to turn off my phone, put it in a different room, and focus, and then I would get swept away in the story. But initially, I was having a lot of trouble. I kept having to pause the timer because I would be scrolling on Instagram, and then I would have to pause it again because I was checking email. Realized more than usual that when I'm reading, I take a lot lot of breaks and I don't really do anything meaningful during those breaks. It's just little distractions that stretch out to be like 20 to 40-minute interludes. So I feel like that was a good thing for me to learn and be aware of so I can grow from that. It's kind of funny that I discovered that in this challenge and not in one where I'm subbing my screen time for my reading time, because that wasn't the format for this. I don't know how many books I thought that I was going to read at the beginning of this, but I feel like if Champion of Fate had actually been good, I kind of wasted almost a day overall. I would say a day of reading got wasted on those 2 books that I ended up DNFing. If that had been a win, I feel like I would probably be talking about 5 books today at least. But because I was kind of spinning my wheels about giving those up, it took a little longer. I did start out with having an idea of what I wanted to read, but then I let it be flexible. So that would be my advice if you want to do this. Be flexible about your TBR. Take it as an opportunity to mood read as much as you can. Also, don't sweat it if you have a very small window of time left and you want to be reading all the way up to the 24-hour mark. I did not do that. I still consider the challenge fulfilled, but I didn't read all the way up to the mark because that would have meant starting something that I couldn't finish. And I'd rather not like start something and not finish it during a vlog, because I think that's part of the fun, is like seeing the whole journey. The other thing that got easier for me over the week was recording clips of me reading or clips on my real-time thoughts. Initially, it felt a little choppy. I kind of let myself go a little toward the end when I was like just finishing the last 2 books because I was really enjoying them and I didn't want to give spoilers about them. Taking that pressure off yourself can really help you if you attempt something like this as well. This was a positive experience. While I wouldn't do it every month, it was fun to do this spring. I'd love to know your thoughts. If you have tried reading for 24 hours, what are your best tips for people that want to try that? Let me know if you've read any of the books that I picked up during this vlog, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stick around for more videos like this, maybe not quite this long, go ahead and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. Thanks for your support, and I will see you in another video soon.